Christ alone, cornerstone, weak and made strong in the Savior's love. Through the storm, He is the Lord, Lord I'm born.
Above all powers, above all kings, above all nature and all created things, above all wisdom and all the ways of man, you were here before the world began. Above all kingdoms, above all thrones, above all wonders the world has ever known, above all wealth and treasures of the earth, there's no way to measure what you're worth. Crucified and laid behind a stone, you lived to die, rejected and alone, like a rose trampled on the ground. You took the fall and thought of me above all. Above all powers, above all kings, above all nature and all created things, above all wisdom and all the ways of man, you were here before the world began. Above all kingdoms, above all thrones, above all wonders the world has ever known, above all wealth and treasures of the earth, there's no way to measure what you're worth. Crucified, laid behind the stone, you lived to die, rejected and alone, like a rose trampled on the ground. You took the fall and thought of me above all. Oh, you were crucified and laid behind a stone. You lived to die, rejected and alone, like a rose trampled on the ground. You took the fall and thought of me above all, like a rose trampled on the ground. You took the fall and thought of me above all.
Thank you, Lord, for every good gift that you provide for us. And thank you too for this opportunity of giving back to you in some small way. And may the monies given so freely, willingly by us, be used here at this call in Kirkcaldy to extend your kingdom, we pray. Amen. Now Marjorie's got a reading for us. Where's Marjorie? Are you going to come up to the microphone, Marjorie?
If you would rather.
Yes, please, then everybody can hear you. I'll just give you the reference in case anybody wants to follow it. It's Mark chapter 2, verses 1 to 12. That's what Marjorie's come. And ready.
Is it here, James?
Yes, if you could stand here
Yes, thank you.
and use that mic, that's lovely. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Jesus forgives and heals a paralyzed man. A few days later, when Jesus again entered Capernaum, the people heard that he had come home. They gathered in such large numbers that there was no room left, not even outside the door, and he preached the word to them. Some men came, bringing to him a paralyzed man, carried by 4 of them. Since they could not get him to Jesus because of the crowd, they made an opening in the roof above Jesus by digging through it, and then lowered the mat the man was lying on. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralyzed man, "Son, your sins are forgiven." Now some teachers of the law were sitting there, thinking to themselves, "Why does this fellow walk like that?" Sorry, the fellow talk like that. He's blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone? Immediately, Jesus knew in his spirit that this was what they were thinking in their hearts. And he said to them, "Why are you thinking these things? Which is easier, to say to this paralyzed man, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Get up, take your mat and walk'? But I want you to know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins." So he said to the man, "I tell you, get up, take your mat, and go home." He got up, took his mat, and walked out in full view of all of them. This amazed everyone, and they praised God, saying, "We have never seen anything like this." Amen.
If you were thinking about scenes from the Gospels that you'd like to have been there and personally witnessed, for me this would have been one of them. I mean, we use the phrase sometimes, perhaps not often from a rostrum, gobsmacked, everybody that would have been there, open mouthed at this, and it's something we can all not identify with, but we can visualise so clearly. The band are going to play to us, and it's arrangements of what a friend we have in Jesus. one of the, I was going to say a privilege, I don't know whether it is a privilege really, of my role now at DHQ is I'm in receipt of all the core council minutes from around the division. And it's very interesting reading. But it's amazing how many of these core council minutes are really, certainly the majority of items, some exclusively the items are what you could class as housekeeping items. You know, the practical stuff of just keeping a core going. Now, those things need dealing with. You know, we can't ignore them, they need dealing with. But it's interesting when you look at the proportion of housekeeping stuff to the more missional based stuff. As you travel on through life, whatever way you go, keep your eye upon the donut and not upon the hole. And I would make a suggestion to you that the housekeeping stuff, all these, the kind of ancillary stuff that when we went into lockdown, we didn't have to think about because we weren't involved here. All we were doing whatever each core did in terms of providing worship on a Sunday. That could have been written sheet, it could have been YouTube, it could have been whatever. But all the other stuff that we have to now start to get used to doing again, we weren't doing. But now, as we come back, those things are kind of impinging upon us again, aren't they? But this morning, I want to focus on what I'm suggesting to you is the donut. The centrality of the gospel message. What is that? 1 Timothy chapter 1 verse 15 says, "Here is a word you can depend on. Jesus Christ came into the world to save sinners." To save sinners. That's the donut. That is the donut. And I want to illustrate that by the reading that Marjorie brought to us, this very vivid account of the healing of the paralytic, And I want to point out certain things from that reading. I want us first to notice the helplessness of the paralytic. Verse 3, "And they came bringing to him a paralytic carried by 4 men. He was completely helpless, and no doubt desperate for a change in circumstance. He himself was incapable of achieving this. The only way he could find deliverance and liberation from his infirmity was through the active intervention of others." Now, we live in an age when so much is at our fingertips. We're the possessors of ability and knowledge only dreamed about by our grandparents or even our parents. And COVID has taught us that even with the most intractable problems, a solution is there to be found if we throw enough weight behind it. Hence, the vaccine programme. If we throw enough effort, money and intellect at the issue, we will find the solution. And we might think, is there anything beyond our abilities? Well, we need here this morning to acknowledge the fact that there is a gap. There is a spiritual divide that is unbreachable. However hard we try, whatever we do, the chasm is too great. And we, as a denomination, the Salvation Army, and as individuals, have been placed where we are as agents of transformation. And there's no greater responsibility and no greater privilege. We're not here to perpetuate an institution, to keep our denominational machinery turning, but to be interventionists, to be a bridge, to stand in the gap, showing how this chasm of sin and separation can be dealt with. We know that it was Marx who said religion is the opium of the people. He also said the first requisite for the happiness of people is the abolition of religion. Now, I tend to agree with Marx. Not in the same way, of course, but people will not be spiritually satisfied if they're looking to religion to satisfy that longing. We know that we can be religious to the nth degree and still be as helpless as the paralytic. I firmly believe there's nothing more off-putting to the young church as a pious religiosity devoid of true Christ-loving spirituality. At one corps that we were stationed, when our youngsters were very small, our son would probably be about 8, our daughter would be about 4. We would come in on a Sunday after the meeting, and this was, it was then, we'd gone down from 3 to 2 meetings on a Sunday, but there was 2 Sunday schools and 2 open airs as well, so it was a full day at the army, and many of you can identify with that. But when we came home for lunch, we let the youngsters go out in the back garden, and the son would kick the ball about, the girl would skip about. Now, on occasions, the ball would go over in next door's garden, only a very low fence. Next door, there was I was going to say an elderly lady, she's probably younger than me. But at that stage, she seemed like an older lady, and her daughter was living with her. They were good, God-fearing churchgoers. But the time came when the ball went over that the lady stood by the fence and said, "If that ball comes over here one more time, I'm putting a knife in it." Well, you can imagine our youngsters were like this and that, and they came in, and we sat there over the dinner table, not saying anything to the youngsters, but looking at each other other than myself and thinking, what a witness. What a witness that is. Now, I don't doubt the frustration at having to retrieve a ball, but if that ball comes over again, I'll put a knife in it. Nothing more off-putting. That was a reflection of how the Christianity was lived out. Nothing more off-putting than pious religiosity devoid of true Christ-loving spirituality. More of that later. What I want you to also notice is the size of the crowd, verse 4. And when they could not get near him because of the size of the crowd. How we love to see crowds clamouring to hear the gospel. Many people have got memories here of Billy Graham crusades, and I'm sure there'll be people here who will have attended Billy Graham crusades. And given what we've had to experience over the last couple of years, we're happy, aren't we? We're so happy to get people back under one roof. Now, we love our stats in the army, statistics. We're not as bad as we were, but we still have a bit of a fixation on numbers. But I want you to note that in the instance here, the scriptural instance here, numbers weren't an asset, they were a liability. It was the numbers which were preventing the paralytic from being brought to Jesus. And I'm not trying to stretch this too far. We all promote events which are targeted at increasing numbers. You had a successful open day not so long ago with that view, bringing people in from the community. Carol services would be another opportunity where we're able to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. We need to try and bring as many people as possible under the influence of the gospel. But it is self-evident that if individuals are our primary focus, to a degree, larger numbers will take care of themselves. People may be attracted by groups, but they will be saved one by one. And there will be those who remember the old axiom, if you bring the one next to you, and I bring the one next to me. Targeted efforts, targeted prayer, targeted conversations in your street, in your neighbourhood, in your community centre, targeted relationship building. And so in verses 3 and 4, we're introduced to these 4 men. We don't know anything about them. No names are given to them. They come onto the pages of Scripture and they disappear again after they've had their input. But what a role they played. Were they relatives? Were they just friends? Were they neighbours of this paralytic? We absolutely don't know. All that we do know is that their level of concern was so great that they weren't going to let obstacles get in their way. They were a great illustration of that adage, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. All too often we embark on what we believe to be a spirit-inspired course of action, but at the first whiff of difficulty or opposition, we let it slide or we cast it aside. I believe there are times when our efforts fail, not because the idea was bad, but simply because we lacked perseverance. Most things worth doing are not going to come to us handed on a plate. We will have to overcome before we arrive. And if you look back through history, you can find countless illustrations of this. Wilberforce with slavery, you know, we laud him now as the one who led the fight to abolish slavery. But if you watch the film Amazing Grace, you'll see the setback after setback after setback he had before slavery was abolished. Many of us lived through the era of the civil rights movement in America, Martin Luther King. And again, he's lauded now as this great figure who led his people to freedom, in a sense. But again, if you look at the setbacks and the knockbacks that were had by him and others until that happened, I would imagine many of you have got a can of that in your cupboard or your garage. Some of you will know why it's called WD-40. It's because it was because the manufacturers experimented, and on the 40th occasion they got the formula right. WD-40. WD-40. Yeah. So, as we come out of COVID, things might not fall into your lap. There may be significant overcoming to do before you arrive at your desired destination. And there'll need to be discernment. And in a few weeks' time, we're going to be back again on a Saturday, and we're going to be having a vision day where we can look to the future and say, where is God leading Kirkcaldy Core in 3 or 5 years' time? And that will give the opportunity for that discernment. What needs to be picked up again as we come out of COVID? What needs tweaking or adjusting? Maybe what needs jettisoning? There were 4 of them, but I wonder which one took the initiative. You can't imagine 4 of them all saying simultaneously, let's get him on a mat and take him to Jesus. One of the 4 must have had that thought. Must have been the idea of the one. And sometimes you will be the one that the Spirit uses as a catalyst to action. On other occasions, someone else will take the initiative and you will simply pick up a corner of the mat to help. And I wonder what do you think the reaction was of the other 3 to the one who raised the idea? Do you think they were dubious as to the chance of success? Quite probably. Certainly, possibly. But their doubts didn't lead them to cynicism. Even possibly unsure, they were still willing to take up a corner of the mat, to pick up a corner of the mat, take a step of faith. If they'd been cynical, I don't think they'd have even picked up their corner. You will find, there is nothing wrong with critically evaluating suggestions or assumptions. It's healthy. We shouldn't accept at face value everything we hear or are told. Certainly not from this place. But cynicism can be deadly. we become ultra negative, unable or unwilling to exercise faith in a God who is able. The significant truth here is that they shared a common concern and bonded together to achieve their purpose. It was a scriptural illustration of what's been said so often during COVID. We're all in this together. We're all in this together. No one is safe until everyone is safe. And then verse 4 again, their initiative. Can you imagine the scene? Those lucky ones who had managed to get inside the house where Jesus was teaching, they were rapt with attention at what he was saying, and then all of a sudden little bits of straw start to come down from the ceiling. One or two eyes glance up and then back to Jesus, and then more and more straw starts to come, and then all of a sudden a little bit of sunlight appears above them, and the hole gets bigger and wider, and they stand there looking up, probably with their mouths wide open at what they were seeing. Now, I don't know, I've no scriptural warrant for saying this. I can't see Jesus having his mouth wide open in amazement, but I can see him laughing. I could see Jesus laughing because he would know what was happening, and he would be so heartened by this exercise of faith that he was witnessing. Now, of course, I'm not advocating this in this day and age. You had enough problems with this building to have another hole put in the roof, haven't you? You couldn't do it today. You have to carry out a risk assessment first. You maybe a concern that you were disturbing asbestos in the roof. A structural engineer would need to vouch for the safeness, the soundness of the building, and the health and safety would say that before lowering, everyone below would need to have a hard hat. Often, even though we might smile at that, often we are risk averse in terms of our reaching out, recognizing and addressing the whole, the donut and not the hole. And if you know anything about the history of this movement in which we serve, you will know that our spiritual forefathers were known for their innovation. They were always on the lookout for something new and innovative, not for novelty's sake, but as a means of arresting attention as the message was proclaimed. And I would suggest that the Salvation Army, of which we're all a part, has gone the way of all organisations that move beyond their first generation. And we're now multiple generations into our movement. And often innovation has largely given way to entrenchment, more a let's hold what we have mentality. And this is not a call to abandon the familiar, because the familiar may work. Rather to assess all of what we do in missional effectiveness. And a post-COVID return gives an ideal opportunity to do that. And in a few weeks, you've been doing it before now. I've read your minute. You've been doing it before now, and a further opportunity will be given. And you may not be called to cancel, but just to adapt or to tweak. Well, we're nearly at the end. Verse 5, note their faith. Seeing how much faith they had, Jesus responds to their faith. The last 2 years will have affected each of you in different ways, even spiritually. There will be those of you who have maintained steadily your walk with the Lord. Others will have deepened that relationship as you've had to exercise real faith in trying circumstances. And I would suggest there have been people associated with Kirkcaldy Call, just like any call and any church, whose faith has been negatively affected by COVID. Separation from fellow believers, being out of the habit of regular live worship, having to deal with adverse circumstances without the support of church community, having to deal over the last 2 years with the stuff of life, seemingly on their own. Any core, including yours, is emerging from the pandemic with a soldiery exhibiting what could be classed as a smorgasbord of experience. But note, it only took 4 exercising faith to make a miracle happen. This incident proves that Jesus responds to our faith. And I would say to you, as an individual, each of you as individuals, can you not find 3 other people to pick up a corner of the mat with you? Conspiracies are often viewed negatively, but what about engaging in a spiritual conspiracy to raise the spiritual temperature of this your core that you love? And if you don't like the word conspiracy, what about engaging with others in a redemptive covenant, enlisting the help of others in effecting spiritual transformation? What better gift could you give to your CO and to the core in general? And the effects of spiritual transformation, well, they're highlighted in verse 9 to 12, the healing of the paralytic. I'm aware of core who, because of social distancing, had to split the meeting in 2. They wanted to have a live meeting, but they couldn't get everybody in with 2 meter distance, so they had to have 2 meetings. And maybe one would start at 10 and the other would start at 11:30. Now, this is true, it's not made up. One soldier, when asked why they had plumped for the earlier one of the 2 meetings, replied, to get it over with. To get it over with. You'd want to ask that person, wouldn't you? Why do you feel like that? What's COVID done to you? What's the period of separation done to you that you would feel like that? If that was more of a general mindset, what would you imagine the worship experience to be at that core on a Sunday? All of us have been through times of spiritual dryness when the heavens are as brass, but the opposite is true. When the Spirit is moving, when people are under conviction and responses are being made, when by the Spirit's presence worship has a wow factor, you won't settle for anything less. And there's that tingle of excitement as you come through the door, thinking, I wonder what God is going to do amongst us today. And often spiritual receptivity is caught and it's not taught. If people see God at work, their spiritual temperature is raised. How long can you go on believing in miracles when you never see them happen? When was the last time you saw a miracle? Your own version of a paralytic, which caused you and other people to stand open-mouthed. If it's recent, thank God for it. If it's a while, pray for such experience. Lord, show your power. I'm willing to carry a corner of the mat, Lord, but the power is yours. Isn't this what we want? The last verse there talked about the people were amazed. They'd never seen anything like that before. People being awestruck at the mighty moving of our God and becoming not mere spectators to his movement, but active participants, mat workers, mat takers, co-workers, bringing in the kingdom just where they are. And so we would say, Lord, may it be so. Do it now, in this day and generation. May we have no time to dwell on what you have done in the past, because we're so caught up in what you're doing in the present and the future. Give us eyes to see the possibilities when our efforts are harnessed to your power, and help us to pick up a corner of the mat to bring in your kingdom here at Kirkcaldy. Now, you may wonder that, and you can see here, we have here some dotted on the map here and on these trays, symbolically little corners of the mat. And the piano's going to play in a moment, and someday 2 people are going to come around with a tray. I invite you just to take a piece of the corner of the mat. There's nothing magic about it, it's just a piece of felt, but it symbolises the corner of the mat. And as you hold it, I want you to pray. No one will know if you're making this prayer, but it's my encouragement to you. Say, Lord, I'm just holding this, just as a willingness to say, I'm willing to take hold of the corner of the mat, Lord. And it may be that you already know what taking hold of a corner of the mat means for you and means for this call. Or it may be that you need to say, I'm willing to take hold of a corner of it, Lord, but I don't know really what that means for me at this moment in time. But I just want to tell you, I'm willing. I'm willing. So let's have some music on the piano, please. And the pieces of mat will come round, and I invite you to take them. Standing as an indication of your commitment this morning. Take that opportunity. Take the corner of the mat with you. You can use it as a coaster. You can stand an ornament on it. Just put it somewhere where it's visible. And in the days and the weeks that lie ahead, as you look at it, it will be a reminder to you of your commitment this morning to pick up a corner of the mat. We conclude our worship by singing together, I'll go in the strength of the Lord. And I invite you to stand as we sing. God bless you, and may you have a lovely week, a week when we can focus on the donut and bring his kingdom in just where he places us. And I believe before we go for a cup of tea, there are some announcements. Please be seated.
Well, what a blessing this morning. Thank you for joining us, and thank you also to Clive and Jane for flowers, and I think Margaret also has provided flowers, so we are blessed this morning in so many ways. And if, as I announced last week, if you'd like to go on the rota, have a quick word with Jane. People have really responded to that. We've only got at the moment the 24th of April and the 1st of May, and then we are covered all the way up to summer, so thank you so much for that. In recent weeks we've been welcoming Gemma into our fellowship as a detached youth worker or street-based youth worker. She's done a great job at profiling Kirkcaldy and looking at where the needs are and meeting other agencies and starting to look at what the needs could be. But she's now at the stage where she's needing to recruit some volunteers to work alongside her. So if not yourself, but you know someone that would like to join in that process and that mission opportunity that Dennis has talked about this morning, then have a quick word and she'll go through all the requirements PVGs and training and all the stuff that comes with that. Just to let you know that we hope from next week to be able to live stream our worship. For those who can't, more than that. For those who can't make it on a Sunday but pick up the YouTube video later in an effort to try and help them feel even more part of the fellowship, we will be able to hopefully show worship as it happens from 11 o'clock next week. So behave yourself if you stood under the camera, won't you? As has been already said, it's great to welcome the singing group back after such a long break. The band started again in October, the singing group in January, and as Dennis said, a milestone in our journey beyond the COVID pandemic. There is some training being provided for those who have an interest or a care for the LGBTQ plus community. This is a territorial-led training event that's been rolled out through the Divisional Youth Specialists. If you'd like to join in that and get to know how we can pastorally care for those who are part of that community, then the next training session is at Edinburgh Gorgie on the 30th. That's next Sunday at 3 o'clock. There's also one in Falkirk in February if you can't make that. Just have a word if you would like more details on that. Our Bible studies start, this little 4-week series starts on Tuesday, beginning with the parable of the sower, after we looked in worship last week at the parable of the talents. 11:30 in here, a bit of sung worship and prayer, then a little study and discussion. Be ready to participate. It's not a Sunday service, it's not someone talking to you all the time. It's participation is crucial. So come with your Bibles, come with your thoughts, come ready to participate, and then let's connect at 12:30 as normal. And finally, the food bank. Thank you for those who provided some things for the food bank. We have been making the most of all the donations that have been given through Christmas, and since we've returned into January, there is a great need out there. So if you are able to support that by sticking an extra item in your shopping, then that would be really appreciated. Thank you, and do join us for tea and coffee. God bless.